We're starting with, what's our book? And we have a small group instruction with this book for anyone following along on YouTube. And who's our author? Michael Doris. Yes, he's behind trees. And we're still on chapter 1. And we just had left off with the fact that our main character, whose name at the time right now is still Walnut. And he has impressed upon his mom that he can see quite a few things in nature that his mom cannot. Is he truly seeing them with his eyes? No, he's using his other senses, right? And so his mom has figured this out, truly. And so she's letting him use his other senses and using this as a skill. Because she's realized that he's not going to be able to ever shoot his mark and get his breakfast. So she is having him hone in on his other skills. Okay, we're starting in the middle of page 6. Are you guys with me? Okay, here we go. At the end of the summer, there was always a great feast. And that was when boys my age had to prove by their accurate shooting that they were ready to be grown up. I'm not going, I told Brings the deer. We were lying on our backs on the bank of the pond at the south end of the village, waiting for fish to swim into our net. You said I had to practice, and I've not practiced. Instead, I've played games with my mother. She's told me, he said. All around us was the noise of people working. Some were gathering hollow greens and hollow gourds in huge piles that made a popping sound when they knocked together. Others were stacking firewood. I could hear them stumbling up with their arms full, dropping the load with a rolling crash, and then even the tap, tap, tap of setting the logs straight. Even Brings the deer was replacing the old bluebird feathers on his fancy headband with new ones. From off to one side, I picked up the rich hickory smell of stewing venison. My father will be so ashamed. My best friend Frog was, I knew, even now out somewhere practicing his aim. I didn't know why he was nervous. He told me that he had been able to shoot moss out of the air on its very first try. Have you asked him? Who, Frog? Had he even Brings the deer heard of Frog's talent? Your father. Have you talked to him about this? No, but he's coming now. Brings the deer stood up and looked all around. Where? On the other side of the pond. I told him, just as my father called out our names. Stay with me, please. I'm in the middle page, or middle bottom of page 7. Walnut, Brings the deer, where are you? Oh, I see him now. Over here, he yelled. While we waited for my father, he walked like a beaver, his feet flat and wide apart, to make his way over to us. Brings the deer sat next to me and shook his head. It's amazing, he laughed and admired the design of the new feathers. My sister, she did not exaggerate. Now, what is his uncle amazed about? It's hard to infer.
Maybe his headband?
Good guess. But his uncle's amazed because Walnut was able to hear how his dad was coming from so far away. He could hear something going on so far away. And so Brings the deer was saying, no, my sister didn't exaggerate. Your hearing is phenomenal. Now, why is Walnut's hearing so strong?
Because
Cam.
when your sight gets worsened, all your other
Senses are
stronger.
good, very good. All your other senses are heightened. Before I could say anything, my father burst from the rest of the colors around us and sat down on my stomach. He sighed and stretched his arm. A dry and comfortable seat at last. I can't breathe. I tried to shove him off me, but he was too heavy. How very strange, my father said to Brings the deer. I thought I heard my son speak from inside my own body. Yes, Brings the deer replied. It's what a bird must feel when she sits on her nest after the chicks hatch. I'm sinking into the mud. I muttered and poked my father beneath his ribs with my finger. Why was he being so playful, as if I were still a little boy? What's this? What's this? He cried, cocking his head and jumping up. Walnut, what are you doing down there? Here, come quickly. The contests are going to start early. Father, I began. I hated to embarrass him. No time for talking. This year, there is going to be an extra trial, a much harder trial. Harder than hitting a target? I might as well stay in the mud instead of cleaning up. Now, do you think the way his father's being so playful with his son, do you think his father knows that Walnut is bothered?
Yes.
Yeah, good guess. Good. Are you starting to get the impression, think about the character traits of his dad. Do you think his father is a good father to have that intuition that his son is bothered? Yeah, it's leading us to believe that his father has some good fatherly character traits. Boys my age were already waiting in the clearing where ball games were played. Each one had his bow and quiver of arrows. As we passed my friend Frog close enough for me to glance directly into his face, I realized that though he was nervous and excited, he wasn't half as unhappy as I felt. The flat afternoon sun made the colors of earth and rocks as bright as if they were wet. There was no wind to stir the branches of the trees and give me an excuse for missing my shots. The sky was pale, shiny blue of a trout's scale. Oh, that's a nice, what is that called when you compare two unlike things? You compare and contrast, it's like figurative language. What were you going to say, Cannon? Figurative language, when you compare things that aren't anything like. Brantley, do you remember?
Simile or metaphor.
Good. When they use like or as, is it a metaphor or a simile? You guys remember?
Like or as a simile.
A simile. Good. The sky was at the pale, shiny blue of a trout scale. So wait a minute. They didn't use like or as. So it's a metaphor. You're right. So the sky and trout scale, I would say that's a metaphor. It's a great one. It helps us visualize it. Brings the deer, gave my arm a squeeze, and then went over to join the crowd of adults and small children watching in the shade nearby. I was sure my mother must be among them. I wondered what she was thinking. When people learned that she hadn't taught me how to shoot, they might criticize her. Yeah. So, you don't like that feeling when someone criticizes your family. You feel protective of your family, especially your parents, right? Their weroance, our most important person, expert on hunting, stood nearby. She raised her hands for quiet, and then everyone was still. She spoke in a slow, booming voice. She saved for the most solemn moments. Remember, solemn means quiet and still. It seemed to come from deep within her body, to be blown through a horn of shell, to rattle like the skin of a hand drum. So just imagine all the people now are quiet and still of anticipation. This is a very big moment that so many have been waiting for. You feel the excitement in the air, the tension, the nerves, the parents waiting to be proud of their sons. The sons, are they excited? Are they nervous? Are they anxious?
Nervous.
Do they have apprehension?
All of the above.
All of the above, yes. Sometimes, she said, the people need someone to do the impossible. As necessary as hunting is, as necessary as growing and harvesting plants, sometimes we need even more than those tasks can provide. We need someone with the ability to see what can't be seen. And we won't have the regular contest until someone passes this new one. Now imagine the curiosity that's being built. This great new anticipation with which she speaks. There was silence. Then all the boys around me began to whisper to one another. What does she mean? Worried one. How can they expect us to do that? Another demanded. Isn't it enough that our mothers have taught us how to shoot moths from the sky? So, the weroance went on, steady as the beat of a large bird's wing. The first test will be for... I missed what she said because something fell at my feet, and I looked down. It was the sash and a length of grapevine. My mother must have tossed it. See behind trees? Frog repeated the werowance's words, and the boy next to me looked toward the forest uncertainly. But I knew what to do, so I tied the sash around my eyes, and I remained very still. The wind made my fingers through the trees, and I used them to feel my way in each direction. My mind flew the way a hawk must fly, skimming over all that was ordinary, alert for the dart of something out of place. I paid no attention to the rustle of leaves or the rain of a waterfall. Those expected sounds, those sounds I knew from all the morning games with my mother, I put to one side, and I waited. What was that? A dead branch snapped. A rock slightly closer tumbled down a hill. A breath was drawn in. Who will begin? The werewolves interrupted my ears. You, she said. And Frog tried, without much hope. I see a raccoon. He is asleep in the bough of a tree. You, she said, another voice. Sleeps late, no more, confident answered. I see a spider web strung up on the branches of a mulberry bush. Now you, she said, but this time there was no reply. You, Walnut. I thought so hard that my head felt tight between my ears. I was afraid to make a mistake in front of so many people, but then I pretended it was my mother asking me to listen, curious and interested as she had been each morning. A man is coming from the south. He is light on his feet, but has a limp. He is not young, for he must breathe hard to climb. He is... I stopped talking. I shut my eyes even behind my blindfold, and I concentrated. There was no mistaking it. He is laughing. It is Greyfire. I heard people turn to look behind me, whispering among themselves. I could almost feel them looking to see if I was right. And that part of the forest was dense. The paths overgrown and winding. There! Brings the deer's voice was loud above the rest. It is Greyfire, the werowance's brother. He had been given the name because he was so quiet he could pass through the village like smoke. Strong hands untied the vine that bound the sash around my eyes. My father's hands, they lingered for just an instant on my hair. I am sure no one else but me noticed. This part of the contest is over, the werewance announced. Each boy except the one who passed must now prove himself with a bow in order to earn the right for his grown-up name. And what of the boy who passed? My mother called out from where she stood. What about my Walnut? When a boy passes the test, he is no longer a boy, the werewance answered. He is no longer wearing a boy's name. Everyone stopped what they were doing to hear what she would say next. I turned the sash in my hand, the sash my mother had woven. It was soft to the touch, as if it had been made from silky moss. Sees behind trees, their werewance pronounced, is now a young man.